The Presleys. You've heard the myths, you've heard the rumors, and you've heard the stories, but what is actually true? Welcome to the Presley Files. Let's open the case. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Presley Files. My name is Amy, and I'm so glad you're here. I apologize for the delay of getting this out. I know I posted on the community page a couple days ago. It would be out Sunday, maybe Saturday, who knows? But I am not a content creator. I am not a techie person. So it's been a tremendous learning curve. And on top of the research, learning how to make a slideshow, learning how to make my intro. But I'm not techie, but I'm also determined. And if I don't know something, I'm going to teach myself how to do it. So these are probably not going to be the most high-tech shows to start with. Get better as we go along. So a little background on me. I've loved Elvis Presley my entire life. I do not know a life without Elvis in it. Read everything I could get my hands on about him since I was old enough to read. Very small child. Would ride to the library, and I was a latchkey kid after school, so I would ride my little bike to the library and read Elvis books. And before there was social media and before, I just wanted to know. So in the last couple of years, the social media influencers and posting about Elvis, and there's been some hot topics in the Elvis world come out since we sadly lost our Lisa Marie. And so me being a curious person and wanting to know everything and looking things up, I have shared things online that I found. I've shared things with various content creators to give them content. And with that, I've kind of lost my privacy. And I'm just going to lean into that at this point because there's no walking this back. So I do want to say I do not label myself a researcher. I do not label myself a historian. Those labels have been placed on me by other people, but I would never call myself that. So I just want to preface that and get that out of the way. This is going to be very informal. A lot of people who've had chats with me privately, this is how we toss research back and forth. We pull sources from various books and articles and put our heads together and determine what is true. Because with Elvis Presley, while there's so many people who have spoken on Elvis, spoken for Elvis, Elvis never got to tell his side. And as we know, there are 2 to 3 sides to everything. What's that great saying? My side, your side, the truth. So I have made a slideshow of all my sources. I'm obviously not going to read every single thing because I'm not going to bore you. That's why you're not seeing my face, because it's easier to read that off the slide than you looking at my head down while I'm reading it from the books. The sources tonight are going to be Elvis What Happened, Elvis Still Taking Care of Business, Elvis Portrait of a Friend, Alicia Kerwin, The Mystery Solved by Darren Lee, and 30 Pieces of Silver, and then one newspaper article. So this is the topic tonight. The file we are opening tonight is Paige Peterson. And maybe some of you heard the story about this girl who almost died in Elvis's arms, and Elvis made her drink all this cough syrup, and they were drinking it out of champagne glasses and high heel shoes and all this craziness, right? Would you have a gallon of cough syrup? We know cough syrup comes in a usually 16 to 8 ounce bottle, but apparently from the tales that were told, they had a lot of it. The question is, there's 2 different accounts, and there's eyewitnesses there that you will come across here in these findings. That what was said in what Elvis What Happened is absolute nonsense about this incident. And so for one side, we have recently, one of the only ones that's left, Dave Hebler, saying we didn't write that book. Well, no, you didn't. Dunleavy did. But you did read the manuscript. You did approve it. And the really sad thing is we'll come across too is we can set Elvis What Happened aside, and we can say that was sensationalized. That's what Dunleavy did. We can give some grace, but I can't on this one because Delbert West goes ahead and tells the same lie in his book. Just a little spin to it though. So this is very informal. This is what it's going to be in a group chat with me listening to my ridiculous voice clips because I just toss this information around. These are my opinions. These are my feelings. You're entitled to yours. I'm entitled to mine. I'm open for discussion as well, but I am very analytical and I take all of the information and read it and then come up with a conclusion. So let me stop flapping my yap and we're going to get into it. So I'm going to add my slides up here. Look at me knowing stuff. So this is Elvis What Happened. Sonny's talking about the night. They call her Jane in the book because at that point they didn't want to expose her. So Elvis had met her, I believe, in Lake Tahoe. According to Sonny, he saw her from the stage and wanted her to be brought backstage. There's some contention about that, how that actually happened. So talking about Elvis drinking the Hycodan, and they spell it incorrectly here. It's supposed to be spelled Hyoc or Hycodan. And Sonny saying Elvis would get out of his gourd on that stuff. He'd drink it from the bottle. That night, Jane took a little swig, more giggles. Towards 4 a.m., the two of them were nodding off, giggling, stumbling, and slurring their words in happy unison. Then they went to bed. The swigging of the Hycodan continued. Well, how does Delbert know that it did? Because was he in the room with them? Was he peeping through the keyhole? Was there a two-way mirror? How does he know that that's what they were doing just because they were giggling? The next day, Sonny had planned to force Elvis, to go outside to get some sun. He was really pale. For reference, this was 1971. So he goes on to say he can't get Elvis up. They go to check on him. There's no answer. They can't get Jane to respond. Her eyes are hollow. Her breathing is very labored. Calls the doctor. The doctor comes, says she needs to go to the hospital. Elvis allegedly says she just had too much Hycodan, give her some Ritalin. And Elvis was sitting in the lounge room, of the Chino Canyon home. She's going to be all right, Sonny said sullenly. But she just might not ever be the same again. Let me back this up. I apologize. He talks about going to see Jane in the hospital. And this is crucial because we're going to see where this tale differs. So Sonny's skin crawls when he thinks of what happened next. He went across to her and touched her arm. Jane, he whispered softly. She opened her eyes and suddenly Sonny remembers she came off that bed like a wild animal. She was hissing like a GD mountain lion, snarling like a wild beast. And then there's some hissing for sound effect. This is so dramatic. Wow, I got scared. Sonny threw an alarmed glance at Dr. X, who explained, she doesn't know where she is. Is she okay? Sonny asked. Is she going to be okay? Well, the doctor said we don't know how she's going to be affected by this, right? So on and on, then it goes. So they're talking about trying to cover it up. Jane keeps her mouth shut. Jane did call Elvis later that year. He spoke to her briefly. He told her, according to Sonny, "Hun, when you get a little better, I'll take you on tour." But Sonny relates, she was out. Elvis didn't want to face her. Sonny saw Jane again. She and her mother had driven to Las Vegas to catch Elvis's show. He met her mother, too. They were sleeping in their car because they couldn't afford a room in the hotel. Joe Esposito found out about it, picked up the tab, and put them in a guest room. Said, Sonny, I don't hold anything against him. He didn't do anything wrong. So this is Paige saying that. Then Sonny says, but here's the thing. He did get her to drink it. He was the king. Anyone would do anything to please him. Then Sonny grows sad. Man, it was all over for that little girl. Her face never lit up anymore. Whatever happened back there to her when she was overdosed, it had affected her whole personality. She was a different person. There wasn't that shy giggle, that easy laugh anymore. She seemed to be deep and quiet and introverted. I'm no doctor, but that experience just turned her completely around. I never heard Elvis talk about her again. By 71, Elvis was a changed man. Well, here's Paige. Paige looks great to me. Not discounting her experience at all or being insensitive to her experience, certainly. Paige looks pretty good. So Paige gives an interview. She decides she just no longer wants to be quiet after Elvis passes away. And after the book Elvis What Happens comes out, Paige decides she's going to talk to Star Magazine for money. Now she doesn't want to be in the background anymore. With the title, Mystery Drug Girl in the Presley book, I am the one who nearly died in Elvis's arms. Okay? So imagine you've got 9-year-old Lisa Marie going to the store and seeing these people want to get paid. It's crazy to me. So Paige's account is, I think it was pills. I don't know what sort of pills, and I don't remember taking more than one. But I guess I did. I don't remember anything else until I woke up in the hospital. I remember the doctor being very angry at all the drugs that were in me. Elvis called my mother, and they had a plane to pick her up, and I was in intensive care for weeks. Paid all the bills, gave her money, whatever. Paige doesn't remember. She doesn't know what happened. Well, guess who does know what happened? Sandy Miller, and we're going to get to that because Sandy was there, and she kept her lovely journals that are such a gift. Hi, there's our boy. So here's what I'm going to do directly off the back of Elvis What Happened. I'm going to read Sonny's later account in Elvis Still Taking Care of Business. Same old story. Boss, wake up. I yelled for Charlie to get the doctor. This was the doctor's named at this point, Dr. Kaplan. Said regain consciousness. Charlie and I followed the ambulance to the hospital. I wasn't much of a praying man at the time, but I asked God to spare her life. She had her stomach pumped and was put in intensive care. This girl's in bad shape, said Dr. Kaplan. I'll be honest, I can't promise anything. He said there was no reason to stay there as he wasn't sure how long it would be before there was a new development, but he promised to call us with any news. A few hours later, the doctor called to say that Paige was coming around. I went to the hospital. She had tubes down her throat. Now, visualize it. Tubes down her throat. I remember the coming up and growling off the bed like a mountain lion and seemed to be sleeping. But when I touched her arm, her eyes jerked open and she started making awful noises. I asked the doctor if she was all right, and he said that depended on how long her brain had been deprived of oxygen. In the meantime, Elvis called the colonel, and given him the situation, the colonel swiftly went into action. He told Elvis all of us should leave for Los Angeles immediately, and he would take care of everything. So that's Sonny's version of that in his lie he tells. So now we're going to get into the Darren Lee book, the Alicia Kerwin, but this is just accounted for in here as well. Let me make this screen bigger because I sometimes am a blind woman. So there's Elvis being concerned about his image being destroyed by the What Happened book and the Judas and the damage to his career. And so Sandy Miller, back in the day, Google used to have these news groups, much like AOL boards, and they were golden. Like they so many nuggets, and people who knew Elvis, Marty Lacker would come on AOL, Alt.King, I think, and I mean, Marie had a message board. You could go on her. I mean, it was the glory days. So Sandy Miller would share tidbits of her journals, these message boards. They were fantastic. And I would love to do a Wayback Time machine and see if I can start pulling these up. So Sandy says, Elvis may have had Vicodin at the house somewhere, but he was not taking any that evening. The girl, however, who was nursing a bad cold, had her own prescription, cough syrup, and tablets, which she took, which came out of her own purse. The second time she went to drink out of the bottle, Elvis told her, take it easy. She didn't listen. Sandy, before you can reconcile, first, you would have to accept the fact that the incident started in the living room. If that is not accepted, then nothing that follows would make sense. Paige was ill. That was apparent. She had a very bad cold. She also had her own medication that she brought with her. It is this medication which she pulled from her own purse and kept taking swigs of. And it is this medication that Elvis told her to take it easy on. This took place in the living room. I did not see Elvis take any medication in the living room, and I stated previously what happened in the bedroom I have no knowledge of. I just know by the time she went down the hall, she was in bad shape, but it was from taking her own medication. Elvis at that point was okay. So, back and over what we just read, that Elvis, the bottle of cough syrup, Sandy watched Paige pull it from her purse. This is a point of contention because supplying it wasn't Elvis, according to Sandy. And brings out a good point. There wasn't a whole lot of giggling. There wasn't a whole lot of, I think there's some accounts where they say they were drinking it from champagne glasses. You'd have to have a really big cough syrup bottle. I mean, I'm like 16. So did they have like a jug of it to be drinking it out of shoes and sucking on it all night? So it goes on to say, we all sat on that couch together, all four of us, Elvis, Paige, and Jan, her friend Jan. And I didn't miss much as far as what was happening. Not everyone was in the living room for the entire time. The boys were off doing their own thing as everything unfolded. Therefore, they got the end result. Bits and pieces in between as they were passing through the living room. They did not see all that led up to that end result, which might account for the different views. Add to this that with the exception of 3, possibly 4 people, no one was feeling any pain, which in itself is going to blur memory. 2 of those people who were not on anything were Jan and I, who were all using their own substances. Then, in that day, we don't know. So, didn't supply it to her. She took it on her own prerogative against his advice for the nagging symptoms of her cold. Sandy went on to say, I will state that I read somewhere that Paige was drinking champagne out of her shoes. I never saw any champagne or any kind of drink, alcoholic or not, being served up in footwear or glassware for that matter. I think that was added for a better read. Fact is, she was wearing red cowboy boots. I remember her outfit. And they talk about, post these Sandy Miller. Also, I have read accounts of what Elvis's reaction was while he was waiting for word on her condition, and I can only assume that they were assuming what Elvis was thinking. They were at the hospital. We saw an extremely worried and upset Elvis. Jan and I were in the house with him and watching his anguish, watching him pace the room like a caged animal, and it was horrible. I don't know what went on after we left, so I can only tell you what I saw. Can we all be like Sandy Miller in the Elvis world, please? Wouldn't that be wonderful? So yes, it does contradict what was said later by others, but it is what it is. I might also add that the events of that day were written down less than 24 hours after they occurred, and I would have had no reason at that time in 1971 to soften Elvis's image in private writings to myself, which is an extremely good point, right? So we're going to skip through some of these. I had a lot of them, just so we had everything in front of us and I could kind of pick out the high points just to have it all here. And I don't think we need to go through this at all. And some of it's repetitive about, the star of what happened. It goes over that article again that we read. She goes over what says in his second book. So Hamburger James, they statements. The guys who were there give statements of that day. And he's talking about what happened. And he's being interviewed by this E.I. Hutchinson Jr. Talking about Elvis's allergy to codeine, which that's a show. Talking about Elvis drinking this cough syrup. And, did drink out of the bottle. I take my NyQuil straight out of the bottle. I don't measure it. I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just telling you what I do. So there's much interesting in here. Talking about the doctors Elvis got this stuff from, and that's it for a complete other show. Again, over Paige Peterson's account to the Star magazine. Paige said Elvis gave her a couple pills here and there, and she was taking things with Elvis. No, she wasn't. Paige stated, as a matter of fact, to the Star she had never used drugs until the incident of 845 Chino Canyon Road. And then Charlie says of Elvis that night, as far as I can remember, he looked normal to me and was acting normal. It was the girl who I made a comment about. Again, I just mentioned. I said it looks like her lips are turning blue. And of course, later on, I went to bed. And then sometime during the morning, they came and woke me up and called for an ambulance. The thing, Elvis had a cough syrup there that he was taking because he would get phlegm in his throat and he would try to spit it out. He would get a sore throat. He got some called Vicodin. Now, the girl I saw her, when I left the room, and again, I don't know what was in it. I just know the name of it. She would just take it and take a drink of it, like a bottle of water or something. And I don't think he was aware of that. So the investigator comes back and says, is it your statement then that Elvis wasn't aware that the girl was drinking the cough syrup? And Charlie says no. So it's just really interesting to go through some of these side things that, really pays attention to Sandy Miller's journals, and they should, or these books by Darren Lee that have completely accounts in them. Here is where Hutchinson's questioning. So he asks him, this had to do with medication cough syrup? Sonny says, yes, one of those big bottles of it that they had just got. Elvis had just got it the night before, or the day before, or at least it was full the day before. Checking levels of cough syrup. On his task list that they all have. He could have had it for several days because I do not know who that prescription was from. So in one sentence we have, it was the night before, the day before, or several days. We don't know. We're not sure. Last month, last year, it was Vicodin. When I went to the extra room, there was maybe about half an inch left. And that amount should last a person for 4 weeks, taking a teaspoon or something, 3 times a day. So here's our 5 conclusions from Darren Lee's assessments of everything. Elvis observed Paige's overuse of Vicodin. He attempted to reason with her but failed. He knew her mother and paid all medical expenses. Elvis demonstrated compassion by comforting Paige with Bible scripture as she recuperated in the hospital. He telephoned Paige twice after the Palm Springs incident. And we have a little bit of tale from Kathy Westmoreland, and they asked Kathy about champagne glasses at the Palm Springs house and if she ever saw Elvis use a champagne glass. And so Darren Lee said, so how did Elvis and a young lady take 16 ounces, pour into 2 champagne glasses, and drink for hours? Kathy, that's impossible. The math doesn't add up. It's stupid. It's considered the bodyguard's version of October 71 events in Palm Springs, a BS lie. But predictably, glib biographers and turncoats have sided against him, preferring instead to deem Paige's Vicodin consumption to the result of a drug-riddled superstar self-destructive behavior. This is a bad coincidence. This is but one bad consequence of being stigmatized as a drug addict who wants to go out on a limb and place trust in an individual whose addiction is closely associated with unpleasant words such as junkie, thief, and mentally ill. And so once the lie is told, it just gets perpetuated, right? We use a source for Elvis what happened, and then other biographers take it and put it in their book, and then the lie just grows, and it grows at the expense of Elvis. And it grows at the expense of his daughter. And then it grows at the expense now of his grandchildren. Because who's to say Riley Harper, especially Finley and Harper, don't read books about their grandfather? Because who do they have to go to? about their grandfather. If they really want to know the full scope of his whole life, they have access to their grandmother who have a small window. But everything, they may go read these books one day. And I don't think the people who knew Elvis thought about that and what the consequences of that would be. You have freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom from the consequences of said speech, right? So that kind of says it's a little bit of Hebler stuff. We're not gonna even deal with that. Kind of repetitive. A Hikedan. And it's Nash's book. In 74. Oh no, sorry, it's a screenplay that Nash co-wrote, and they changed it to May 74. Elvis took a young fan named Paige to Palm Springs after his closing night in Tahoe, partying on liquid Hikedan. Nash speculates Elvis accidentally overdosed them both. The Colonel, the extraordinary story of Colonel Tom Parker and Elvis Presley, page 283. Combine this passage with the content from pages 415, 514 rather, and 515 of Miss Nash's Baby Let's Play House, Elvis Presley and the Women Who Loved Him, in which it is alleged Colonel Tom Parker went to damage control, arranging to pay $10,000 for the ambulance crew for their silence after his clients served up prescription Hikedan to Paige in champagne glasses, resulting in a night on which both nearly died. No, they didn't. Where is one shred of evidence to back up this allegation involving both? There's not. Testimony to the contrary. So here we go into the remarkable Joyce Vaughn's book, 30 Pieces of Silver. If you have not read this book, I know it's quite pricey to get the actual book, but you can get the digital online copy for like $30, is what I did some time ago. So she kind of did the same things here. She's Elvis What Happened, and Elvis Still Taking Care of Business, and the meeting of Paige Peterson, and all the different varying stories of all of that. And they get the times wrong, which we can give some forgiveness for that, right? I think Sunny says it's in the spring, but her book is so heavily sourced. I mean, crazy the detail this woman goes into to debunk this stuff. And it's well worth the read. It's a huge book. It's like 700. Some of it's big, huge of Elvis, which is always a good time on those pages. But there's just so many gems in this book that it's incredible. And she debunks down to the smallest things. She's about, says he saw Paige from the crowd. And she says how, and was playing just to Paige. And is quoted in an interview if he ever played to a particular person. And he said, that's difficult because of the lighting. I can't hardly see them. I can see them, but not in detail. I will play off someone who's really jumping up and down or yelling or enjoying whatever. I'll play to that in a way, but not all the time. Peterson wasn't one of those individuals jumping up and down or yelling, according to Sunny. She just sat totally mesmerized. Now, the following doesn't sound as if Elvis noticed her at all, because Elvis What Happened changed up the story by claiming it was Sunny and Joe gazing at her. As a reminder, Elvis What Happened gave Paige Peterson the name Jane Robertson. What Joe and Sunny were looking at in Jane Robertson was something that would sure please their boss. She simply oozed beauty and unself-consciousness, sex appeal. Not an ounce of makeup or lipstick on her. She was really something else. This story sounds more like another female they trolled, and if Elvis didn't want to be bothered with her, they'd make a play for her. This was a common practice with these guys, since they spoke of the women Elvis wasn't interested in as being leftovers for them. How lovely, right? The next allegation was Elvis was speaking to them in the elevator after the show about a woman in the audience, whom he obviously could not see from the stage. How did they know which female Elvis was talking about? She wasn't mentioned until after the show, when Elvis was hightailing it out of there, and they certainly were not discussing her with Elvis during the concert. It appears Sonny trolled the girl and used Elvis's name, as he had done several other times when he tried to get a date. And these guys have admitted doing this, right? They've admitted, and if you watch all the Kingsmen, they talk about it. Sonny asked Peterson if he wanted to meet Elvis. She wanted to meet Elvis. At first, she didn't believe him, but he convinced her he wasn't lying. He took her backstage to meet Elvis. After this point in the story, Sonny began sounding pissed off because Peterson went for Elvis. It wasn't the first time a woman wanted Elvis and not Sonny. Delbert, say it isn't so. Delbert, please tell us you're not surprised that if a woman had a chance to get with you or Elvis, that you would be shocked by her choice if she picked Elvis, because, boy, no. There was Kay back in 1961. Another time was on location for the filming of Kid Galahad, where Sonny's date made a beeline at breakneck speed for Elvis. Well, girl, same. I'm with you. There was nothing new about Elvis getting the girl, nor should it have come as a shock when he did. According to Still Taking Care of Business, Peterson met Elvis and decided to stay in his suite with him. She sent her mother home. Elvis saw her a lot during this time, during the Lake Tahoe engagement, rather. Elvis bought her some clothes, but she just wanted to be with him. Sunny stated that Elvis started giving her pills when she never took anything before, and her personality started to change. Sunny described Peterson as having a shy personality. Webster's definition of shy must be different than Sunny's. Then again, Webster's and the IRS difference of cottage industry was different from Sunny's as well. Now, according to Elvis, what happened? Miss Shy Personality sent her own mother home so she could stay with Elvis, a man she just met in his suite. This shy woman stayed with Elvis most of the engagement. With this shy personality, Sunny declared she all of a sudden started taking pills for the first time in her life. We can believe she never took drugs before because Sunny, who just met her, knew her history extremely well. Now, because Sunny had such high moral character and was the epitome of integrity and chivalry, he jumped right in and stopped Peterson from taking these pills. We can imagine that Sunny did say, "Hark, Peterson, you must not take these pills. They will change you in ever such a way, in such a short period. You must stop, I say, you must stop." We can safely assess that Sunny did not step in and stop Peterson's pill popping if there really was any abuse of pills. So I think we have kind of enough evidence. Here's more. She's about the misspelling and how Sunny contradicts Elvis what happened. Elvis brought out the Vicodin bottle, Sunny correctly spelling it 30 years later. That evening, not the original story where he brought out the bottle of Vicodin at bedtime. Then it was reported in Still Taking Care of Business how Elvis and Peterson drank from it all evening long before going to bed. That's a lot. That's a double slide. I apologize. Outside of everything else being inconsistent and factually wrong about this story, there are 2 hospital procedures off target here. How often does a doctor in the emergency room dealing with a life and death situation go to the waiting area and tell people to go home? When does a doctor say, "We'll just call you, don't call us, we'll call you"? The medical expert, this attending physician, did not have the hospital call Peterson's mother? No. Instead, he said he would call Sunny if there was any change. So why wasn't Peterson's mother called if the situation was so dire and Peterson was staring at death's door? Peterson's mother wasn't phoned in either book. Hospitals are required by the law to alert next of kin. Even back in 1970, Sunny and Charlie drove back to Elvis's home. Elvis began to come out of it. Elvis said he told the girl not to drink that much. Sunny blamed Elvis for getting herself in that condition. And this is a little bit of repetitiveness. When he says, never even had a glass. That little girl had never even touched a glass of champagne. And now because of him, she's battling for her life. How would Sunny know whether this grown woman ever had a glass of champagne? He didn't know her. And it was her fault. She should have followed her prescription bottle instructions and stayed home to get over her cold. I mean, got to disagree there, because if I had a chance to hang out with Elvis and I had a cold, baby, I'm still going. There's nothing to stop me. So this is just a little feel for one particular story, right? And there's more slides here, but a lot of it's repetitive that we've already covered. So one small story from Elvis, what happened, and we can take 30 minutes and bring in varying accounts of the same story, right? And systematically debunk key pieces of the story by other eyewitnesses that are there. So imagine on a larger scale rather, all of these stories told about Elvis. And then it makes you start to wonder when you see one that's not correct, when you see one that you know lie, and you start to go, okay, that's nature. If a witness is not factual, if a witness doesn't tell the truth, then that's deemed not a good witness, right? So then why do we continue to everything these people around Elvis say when we have so many instances of them not being honest, or them tilting the story so they don't look as bad, or them leaving the part of it that implicates them, right? Leaving it out. So this is just a little show. Like I said, it's not formal. It's never going to be formal with me. I'll be on camera probably next time. I think we're going to talk about next week. Will it be next week? Yeah, it'll be next week. Rhonda and I are going to cover. Rhonda and I have a huge show tomorrow. Please in. We're so excited. I can't wait. I'm just busting with excitement. And then we're going to do a Blanchard Tool show next week. And then I think I'm going to come back next week and we're going to talk about whether the autopsy is going to be released in 2027, because I really need that story to go away. So thank you all for joining me. I hope I didn't bore you, but this is kind of the theme of this channel. Like I said, you'll see my face the next time. This was just too many slides, and it's not always going to be slides like this. So I know I bumbled over myself, but there's nothing professional here. This is just a girl with a computer talking about the man she loves. So until next time, y'all, thank you for joining.